Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's answers for the recent feedback challenge about paraphrasing for IELTS writing task 2. This was the 9th challenge that we've put up so far. The challenge that we had was to write a paraphrase for the following question. So it says, large companies should pay higher salaries to CEOs and executives compared to other workers. To what extent do you agree or disagree? So this is taken from an opinion essay. I mean, quite a number of paraphrases to get through. So something I always say when you're paraphrasing, first thing you should try and do is think about how you can possibly change the sentence structure. So here we could maybe change the subject and the object. So at the moment we've got large companies should pay higher salaries to CEOs and executives. So maybe we can make the CEOs and executives as the start of a sentence, and maybe use a passive voice would be a good way of addressing this question. And let's see what our students have done. They've got people who work as CEOs and executives ought to be paid higher salaries by big organizations in comparison to other employees. Yeah, excellent. So that's exactly what the students done. They've turned it around, they've changed the subject and the object, and we have a very nice paraphrase here. So great job. So look at our next one. So executives and CEOs ought to be paid higher salaries. Okay, great. In comparison with other workers in big companies. Okay, so I'm mentioning big companies, big organizations. So lots of nice paraphrasing here. Good job. CEOs and executives. So here we wouldn't have this apostrophe. If you ever question like, oh, I might want to put an apostrophe in, and you're paraphrasing, something we definitely should look at first is look at the question, because we know that whatever's in the question is going to be grammatically accurate. So if we look here, we see we've got CEOs written, but there's no apostrophe. So we know that there should not be an apostrophe here when we're talking about CEOs as the plural. So CEOs and executives ought to be paid higher salaries by big organization in comparison, not isn't, so a spelling mistake here, to other workers. Apart from that, really nice. And a lot of these students are doing this really good thing, that this word should comes up a lot in your task 2 questions. And a very nice way to paraphrase should is ought, or ought to. So here, everyone's done the same thing. Really good job. Very impressed by these first 3 paraphrases. Well done. Let's have a look at the next 3. So CEOs and managers who work in large organizations should have higher incomes compared to other employees. Again, nicely moved around. Employees is a nice synonym for workers. So sentence structure has been changed. We don't have to change should to ought, so it's fine. The most important thing, if you can really change the sentence structure, examiners aren't looking so much at synonyms, because they're going, okay, the whole structure has been changed. So it's a very good paraphrasing, the structure has been changed. And then we can have a splattering of synonyms in there as well. So good job again, well done. So CEOs, this is the same problem as the previous student. So just make sure you're checking with the question. If there's no apostrophe there, we know we don't need to actually put it here. And so CEOs and executives of big corporations. The word is actually corporation, so spelling mistake here. Ought to earn higher salaries, more than other employees. So I see this a lot. When we're comparing here, we don't need this more. We're just saying they ought to earn higher salaries, and then you use than, and then you give the other object. So this more is not accurate. And also make sure you've got a full stop at the end of your sentences. These little grammar mistakes, they really add up, and they're very, very easy to fix. CEOs and executives ought to be paid a greater amount of salary by large corporations than other employees. Okay, this expression here, greater amount of salary, is really awkward here. So I think higher, we've already got higher. So maybe we can have larger salaries instead of higher salaries if we want to find a synonym here. So larger. We're talking about salaries in general, so this needs to be plural. CEOs and executives ought to be paid larger salaries by large corporations than other employees. Okay, good. On to our next set. Again, really nice to see that everyone is changing the sentence structure. So you've been paying attention to these previous challenges and everyone's doing very well. Great job. The CEOs and executives ought to be paid higher wages in bigger companies as compared to other employees. This as compared is a little bit awkward. Somebody compared to other employees would be much more natural here. Chief executive officers, so we're just breaking down what this actually means, so good job. And managers ought to be paid more salaries by big corporations than ordinary employees. So more salaries is a bit strange. We can talk about larger or higher, but more means you get 2 salaries. So we're not saying they're going to have more salaries. We're more referring to the size of it here. So larger would be better. Chief executive officers, managers ought to be paid larger salaries by big corporations than ordinary employees. Apart from that, that's fine. CEOs, same issue here. No need for this apostrophe. Remember, we normally use the apostrophe to show possession. Nothing's being possessed here. So I see this quite often with writing. Students like to put this apostrophe whenever they make something plural, but we're only doing it when we're trying to show something belongs to something else. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So CEOs and executives should be paid higher wages, okay, as compared. But again, much more natural to just say to be paid higher wages compared to other employees by big corporations. Fine. CEOs and executives ought to be received. So here we just say ought to receive. And no need for the passive in this expression. CEOs and executives ought to receive higher salaries than other employees. So you receive something not by an object, you receive it from. So I receive a letter from my friend. I receive an email from my boss. So here I would say from corporations. So CEOs and executives ought to receive higher salaries than other employees from corporations. Something we're going to notice here that it did say a large company. So it would be good to make sure that we've got exactly the same meaning. So big or large. So just making sure that the meaning is exactly the same. The highest ranking people in gigantic enterprises or companies, so we're going to choose one. Such as CEOs. Okay, so again, we've already said we don't need the possessive. And executives ought to earn higher wages compared to others. Okay. Here, this gigantic is a little bit excessive. Gigantic, it says very large, but the question is not saying very large. So much more accurate here is just simply to use big. I think a lot of students overly use very strong adverbs and adjectives because they seem to think that it makes their language look very impressive. But by using really strong adverbs and adjectives, it actually makes your language sound quite unnatural. And in academic writing, we don't use extremes. It's very, very rarely do we use an extreme in academic writing. So try and avoid these overly like strong adverbs and adjectives in your writing. Okay, let's move on to our next one. So CEOs and executives ought to be paid higher wages by big corporations. Good. Compared to other employees. Good. And we've got one last one. So big enterprises, presidents and employees. And here the student is showing us how we should accurately use a possessive. So the presidents and the employees belong to the big enterprises. Therefore, we put the possessive comma here. because we're talking about more than one enterprise, we put the apostrophe after the S. So big enterprises, presidents and employees in high positions. Oh, sorry. Big enterprise presidents and employees in high positions are supposed to receive higher incomes than other employees from their companies. However, this time, this apostrophe doesn't quite work because nothing here belongs to these employees. So, because we're just using it, we've got this prepositional phrase to talk about where the employees come from, so we don't need this possessive here. My question here is are supposed to. I think it would be a much better paraphrase just to write ought to rather than are supposed to. Something that just seems a little bit awkward. When we have this should, we can just remember that ought to and should are very nice synonyms. They are direct synonyms, so we know that they have exactly the same meaning. So apart from that, this again was a really good paraphrase. And as you can see, I really haven't had to alter many of these students' work. So a really great job to everyone who's participated in this challenge. What most people have realized, like trying to change our sentence structure here of like making CEOs and executives like the start of the sentence, that was a really nice way of approaching this question. And as a result, most of these paraphrases were very, very accurate. And if I saw these in an exam, I would have very high hopes for the rest of the essay. And that's what's really important about paraphrasing, is that this is your first impression to your examiner. So if you write a nice paraphrase, they're like, oh, I've got a nice essay to mark. And they're more likely to be a little bit more forgiving if they're in a good mood for your paraphrase. So paraphrases are very, very important to set the mood of your essay and really show the examiner that you're able to write, and he or she should be expecting a very good essay. So great job to everyone who participated. Please remember to like if you've got feedback from this. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, so you don't miss out on any of the new content and new lessons. Good luck to all of you in your studies, and I hope you're all having a great week.